Welcome. This is, I think, our third or fourth webinar slash workshop. We try to be very actionable with these. And so, Guy, why don't you introduce yourself and for everybody else and a little bit about Webflow before we get started?
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody, for joining. My name's Guy Yalif. I am a former CMO and most recently co-founder and CEO of an AI website personalization company that Webflow bought a year and a half ago. I've had the privilege of being a marketer, helping marketers create better, engaging experiences online for more than 20 years, while at Twitter, Brightroll, Yahoo, TradeWeave, and Intellimise. 30 seconds on Webflow. We are an enterprise website building platform that makes it really easy for designers, marketers, and developers to collaborate together to build, manage, and optimize visually stunning, engaging, emotionally evocative sites that build your brand, that also do ABM and are personalized and help you drive revenue, coding optional. Brands like Sephora, Procter & Gamble, NCR, P&G, Jasper, and more use Webflow today. And I have the privilege of joining the amazing team at GrowthX here today. Marcel, back over to you.
A little bit about GrowthX, but I'll introduce myself really quickly. CEO, co-founder here of GrowthX. We've been in business just over a year, and we're super lucky to get to work with these amazing brands as well, helping them grow organically, show up better and more often in AI answers. And we do everything from strategy to our platform and AI workflows to having forward deploy experts in the loop that are not just driving the strategy, but also making sure every piece of content, everything you do and get out is amazing. And it's a really full circle, awesome moment to do this with Guy and Webflow, because Webflow is a customer, but also a company that I've admired and followed for years. And I've been a customer multiple times. And so it's really awesome to have these full circle moments. And I'll let Jason introduce himself too.
I'll do a really quick one. My name's Jason. I lead growth here at GrowthX, and I spend a lot of my time with some of our biggest and best customers like Webflow. My background's, growth for a bunch of companies. I was a founder myself, and I was also very early using AI, where I met Marcel at, one of the early dinners for folks building in the space. Today I'll be in the chat. I'll be presenting as well, but throw your questions in there. I'll be watching and answering as we go.
All right. So super high level. We're going to fly through some of these, and then we might stop a little bit and ask some questions. Also, if you post questions in the chat, we might pull that in and try to keep this fairly conversational. But if you're joining today, you already know the shift that's happening, but we'll cover that super quickly. And then Guy's going to take us through a little bit of the state of AEO and this amazing AEO maturity model that is highly, highly actionable. And we'll wrap things up with a little bit of a view of kind of how we work on our end and how we think about content as it relates to AI visibility, and leave plenty of room for Q&A. So, but don't hold back your questions until the end. Feel free to put them in the chat. So, all right, there is a shift happening in case you've been not paying attention to anything ever. But the way I think about it is not only AI answers are your new front page. I even like to take it a step further and say it's also your first sales call. And now if you're not part of the answer, you don't exist. And that's a given. You all know this already. But the way I kind of like to frame this to contextualize, right, is think about your own behavior and how much more information you've given ChatGPT and Perplexity and others. I like to think about it as ChatGPT probably knows more about me than my therapist, potentially even my wife at this point, who knows, but all jokes aside, you're not just sharing, your context or just a quick keyword like, hey, software for architects. You're actually going a lot further into the pain points. You're researching. The average session is 15 to 20 minutes. So, and it's not pulling 1 or 5 sources. It's pulling 20, sometimes 200 if it's doing deep research, right? And so the bar for what you need to do in order to show up here is much, much higher. It's no longer about only quality. it's about quality and volume, not because for volume's sake, but it's because there's a much longer tail of things that you used to answer in a sales call, and now you actually need to bring that content and your perspective on things up front, right? And so another way to think about it is this is the new start of your funnel and your experience of in getting a shot at being known requires, in our opinion, a lot of credible, comprehensive, and fresh content at scale. And we're seeing, we'll show examples later of how sometimes in one single answer, we might have even 6 or 7 citations from different pieces of content. And also the fact that now more than ever, you can't be bogged down with really crappy CMSs, and you need to use something like Webflow to be able to have this strong foundation so that it enables you to get more content out and become the best answer to people's questions, right? And the way we think about it, we'll go into a lot more details, and the maturity model that Guy is going to share is really great for how to frame it, all of this, but you might not be able to guarantee AI visibility. But there's so many things that you can do to increase your odds. And we're going to cover in 4 different buckets of things that are super actionable for you, right? But at a high level, maybe a quick high level of how we think about it is there's certain factors that are becoming more and more important in addition to everything else that you need to do a good job with, right? And we'll cover those a little bit later, but this is findings from us publishing over 10,000 pages in the last year on behalf of some of those brands that we mentioned, like Ramp and Webflow and Augment Code and so many others. And a lot of these are the right things to do no matter what, right? Even if the distribution layer wasn't shifting, but now it's no longer optional, and you need to do it at a scale that if you only throw humans at it, won't be enough, right? And so it's no longer to use AI or not to use AI, to show up in AI answers or not. It's no longer a choice. There's really no other way, and that's why nearly every board meeting, every CMO out there is feeling the pressure, you know? And to that point, I'll pass it over to Guy.
Thanks, Marcel. We are grateful and very happy clients and happy to be partnering with you, and wanted to continue that and say, hey, you know, we all are paying a bunch of attention to this because it is shifting buyer behavior. Forrester surveyed a bunch of B2B buyers. 95% said, I'm going to use Gen AI in my buying process this year. ChatGPT reaches 100 million users in 2 months, faster than any other product ever, because it is useful. At Webflow, a year ago, you looked at all of our non-branded organic traffic. This came from Vivian and our SEO AEO team, and it was basically 0. Now it's 42%. Coming from LLMs. That's enormous growth in a year. So it's something we all need to be paying attention to, as we know. And the environment, we see that, I think you need to click back into the screen and it'll get the focus. Perfect, thanks. The situation that causes for us as marketers, one is a loss of brand narrative control. Like when you go to one of the LLMs and ask them, tell me about Augment Code, tell me about Webflow or GrowthX. Are they repeating back the carefully differentiated words that you have so thoughtfully put together? No, they are reformulating the words that are there and putting together their own lens, sometimes a bland one, sometimes one that misses the key points you were raising, and occasionally something that's just completely wrong.
And one quick thing to add here too that we've seen is if you're ever doing research using Perplexity, ChatGPT, sometimes you see a stat, and if you ever click through it and you go, wait, this is kind of interesting, and then it takes you to this really crappy article that then cites it, and then you click one more, and then it sends you to another article on Forbes that's really a paid article, and you keep going and following. Sometimes you'll land at like a really something that you realize is not even that credible, but you got to also realize how much like these tools, if you will, like ChatGPT and others, are going to continue to invest in making those sources and the quality filters better and better. And that's, I think, a lot of the shift that we're seeing. But then also there's so much nuances of your company, right? That often we're working with companies and we say, hey, can we use your homepage as reference point? And they're like, no, it's outdated. And so if that's what LLMs are using to pull context on your company and it's wrong, then that's an issue, right?
could not agree with you more, and we'll talk about how valuable updated content is. And I'm sure this doesn't apply to anybody who's listening here, but that outdated content on your site or elsewhere, it stays with you longer. Like, the upside is you can have an impact this afternoon because the LLMs are searching so much more often when a query happens. But the downside of that is that outdated content stays for a while. And so what you're saying resonates completely, Marcel. The other thing we're seeing is that, oh, by the way, yes, Beth, sometimes it totally does infer a citation. We literally were doing some work internally and saying, hey, how will we handle hallucinated citations, hallucinated URLs from an LLM? Not a huge amount of traffic, but not zero. Overall, talking to hundreds of CMOs a quarter, we see organic traffic dropping. Not the headline grabbing 80 or 90%, but rather on average 10, 15, 20, 25%. The Bain stat totally resonates for me. And there's a silver lining to this. That is that the traffic coming from LLMs tends to be further down in the funnel. Like at Webflow, 8% of our self-serve signups are coming from LLMs or AI search. I'm using the terms interchangeably. That traffic converts 6 times better than non-branded organic search. Like, not 6% better, 6 times better. And the industry data supports it. Ahrefs and SEMrush found that to be somewhere between 4x and 23x better. They found that LLM traffic goes to 50% more pages on your site. And so, although you're getting less of it, it's further down the funnel on average. The last thing we see is, with all of us going to the same LLMs to help create content, genuinely valuable, original content that speaks to your audience is even more important than it was before. Something GrowthX is excellent at doing, because, like, how many of us are the best, the leader, the first? As one example of the impact of this messaging, LinkedIn pinged a bunch of folks and said, hey, here are a bunch of ads. This isn't ad specific. This is about messaging. And more than 80% of them couldn't say which company the ad came from. That's terrifying to all of us as we're trying to get brands out there. All that having been said, as with any new medium, and to me this has a lot of pattern matching on the early days of organic search, there's both opportunity and threat. Some of the threats we talked about here. Opportunity, there is such an early mover advantage happening here. There's so much that we can all collectively do. For example, adding metadata to your site to help the LLMs understand the meaning of your site. We'll talk about it. It's one of the most important things you can do. If you look at Google's top 10 results, 73% of them have this kind of metadata, but 88% of websites haven't implemented it. Real opportunity for us. And when we surveyed, Webflow surveyed 400 marketers a few weeks ago, 93% of them, of the leaders, and 91% of the practitioners said, yeah, AEO, it's going to be foundational. It's going to transform my business in the next couple of years. At the same time, only a quarter of the practitioners said, I really fully understand what AEO is. There is lots of opportunity sitting here for us. And so today, we wanted to share with you an actionable approach that you can use to guide your own work, or if you're leading a team, to guide and measure your team's work. And then we're going to go dive deep into how you can win in AEO in content itself. So that framework, I invite you to manage your own work, to guide your teams in 4 areas. The first, which GrowthX is excellent at, is content, where at the highest level, we're going to go from counting keywords. The biggest shift is to start answering the questions that your prospects are asking through the funnel. And at the highest level, you are being extremely relevant and personalizing. Second is technical, where we're going to go from on-page SEO to helping LLMs, as I mentioned earlier, understand the structure and meaning of your site. And the way to do that is to add metadata to your site. And we've been doing this for a long time. We did this with Facebook's Open Graph. We did this with technical SEO. Now there are new things we should be doing. And you want to make sure that's always happening on a super fast site globally. Authority. We go from backlinks. They still matter. They do not matter. But now there's increased importance to plain text repeated mentions that are positive about you elsewhere. Just like Marcel was saying earlier, the LLMs can pick up things more quickly than before in plain text, whereas in search, it took a while to get all those backlinks. And you want all this pointing to a visually stunning, engaging experience, because that's a signal of authority too.
And by the way, on that, we've seen cases where we'll publish a piece of content. We're publishing hundreds, sometimes even thousands every week, and it will get mentioned and or cited in an AI answer, especially like with AI overviews, within an hour, which is insane. The chances of that happening for a non-crazy authoritative site, that used to happen if you have like, a 90 plus domain authority, but now it's happening so fast. So to your point.
We all can have a measurable impact very quickly. And the last is measurement. How do we say this is working or not? We go from keyword ranking in the screenshots Marcel was showing earlier, like that whole concept doesn't exist. And so we see most brands going to, was I mentioned in the questions, in the answers to the questions I care about? And then the next level of maturity is to say, okay, for this basket of questions, how often do I show up relative to my competitors? What's my share of voice? And what's the sentiment? Am I being mentioned positively? Like that whole concept doesn't exist in SEO because Google was using our words. Now that the LLMs are reformulating the words, that's an important concept. And so like if you take away just a couple of things from today, this slide is one of them. All right, let's spend a few minutes going a level deeper. We're going to go deep in content with GrowthX, so I'm going to start actually with technical. And technical, you start with the on-page SEO we've always been doing. And as I mentioned, the biggest shift you can make is really just make it easy for the LLMs to understand your content. And there's a particular set of metadata called Schema that I suggest you adopt. Why? Because Google, Bing, Yahoo, Yandex, and others came up with it a few years ago. Some sites have already adopted it because the Google Knowledge Graph element on the search results page often depends on it. LLMs, it's hard to overstate how valuable it is for LLMs. And so it makes it easy to say, oh, here's an events page, here's a product page, here's a bio page, here's a persona page. It has all of those set up. And being able to do that in an automated way, this happens to be Webflow auto-generating schema, regardless of the tool you're using, to be able to put that data on the page, incredibly valuable. Additionally, the data we always should have been putting in there for accessibility, this is auto-generating alt text for images. LLMs are using that often and frequently. And finally, the SEO metadata we always should have had, title, description, which, by the way, we have plenty of work to do. Like 25% of top linked sites on Google still don't have this. But that also has a big impact.
By the way, I've seen probably like public companies with digital teams of 10 plus 20 people and very expensive agencies that don't do any of those three things you just mentioned. And you go in and you audit their site and you're like, there's about 1,800 things here between those three things you just mentioned that are completely off. One more I would add maybe,
Please.
the number of sites we've been encounter recently from customers kicking off that don't even have a sitemap or a sitemap that's not actually getting updated. I'm like, insane.
I could not agree with you more. We auto-generate sitemap.xml. It is so valuable. That and then ensuring you've got effective links across your site. I mean, fundamentals that actually really do matter. Like people will say, here's a list of 100 things for technical SEO or AEO. They're really only a handful that matter.
Yeah.
These are part of that handful. And you want all of this happening on a super fast site globally that's mobile responsive. And at the highest level of maturity, it's a rapidly evolving space. You're adopting and exploring standards as they are taking shape. For example, Webflow supports LLMs.txt. There's zero evidence that the LLMs are using this yet. There's a proposed standard. We think they should be. We did that as part of thought leadership. And there are others, right? We were the first CMS to offer an MCP server. We do see LLMs using those. And there will be more. This won't stop. That's technical. Let's go to authority. In authority, we start with backlinks. And, some said, oh, well, they don't matter anymore. In the extreme, I heard in another session, unverified, a Fortune 500 CMO fired their entire SEO team, said, I'm going to go do AEO now. I could not 180 degrees, black and white, disagree more. Good AEO is close to what good SEO always should have been, where genuinely valuable original content is rewarded, right? I mean, it's like you subtract keyword ranking, you add answer questions and schema, and you're almost there. Yes, there's a little more to it, but this is an evolution, not a revolution. So don't abandon your backlinks. Also, don't abandon creating content that you've got the right to talk about. And by the right to talk about, I mean Google Eat, which they defined years ago as, okay, you've got experience in this, you've got expertise, you've got the authority, and you're trusted in doing this, something GrowthX knows tons about.
And by the way, just to emphasize one word here is trust. Like backlinks was always been just a way to measure how much others trust your expertise, how much others trust that you are the authority in something. And today there's just way more to the third point here on the unstructured, right? Like Reddit, conversation, social, AI answers. There's so many other places that there are additional signals, and it's not that backlinks don't matter, because organic search still drives a very high percentage of traffic to the web. And so if you stop ranking, it also decreases your chances on a bunch of other things that actually matter even more for AI answers.
Totally aligned. And to your point about that third bucket, the value of digital PR to build trust and authority, it's incrementally higher than it was before. Having other sites talk about you is increased in importance. Reddit, like 68% of Redditors are not on LinkedIn, but the LLMs are using Reddit more. That's recently decreased a little bit. But why? The stated goal is that is genuine, authentic content, and their Quora, YouTube, putting out thought leadership, having your execs and you go out there more often, very valuable. And in the higher levels, you want to be putting out thought leadership that other people are citing, that they're using internally. And at Webflow, it's a little bit like the modern version of backlinks, where we will go look at, here's a question we care about. Here are the sites that were cited in the LLM response. Are we mentioned on those sites? No? Let's go reach out to them. Let's go do some co-marketing. Let's maybe do affiliate or influencer marketing. Let's ask our PR agency. Let's go connect with them to see, instead of a backlink, can they mention us there?
And one thing that to emphasize there is I see so many people that come to us asking, can you hack Wikipedia for us? Can you hack Reddit and make it seem like you're someone else than you are, right? And my biggest piece of advice is like, try to stay away from, if that's the only reason you're going to win is because you're going to do some like gray zone things, it's not sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable versus like earning people's, I like to always call it winning the hearts and minds of your audience, but also your potential partners, right? Like the ones that might be mentioning you, like an agency. Are they mentioning Webflow in a piece of content, and building that relationship genuinely?
Could not agree with you more. And happily, it seems like we probably skipped a whole phase of spammy, crappy stuff, where if you look in the LLMs, 85% of the content there is either entirely human or a little bit of AI assistance. So the concept of like, I'm going to create a gajillion web pages, all LLM AI generated, and that's going to not rank, but appear often. Happily, it seems like that's not working. And part of why it seems like is because the LLMs have more data.
Yeah.
As we all learn to speak Google, our average query was 4 words. In LLMs, it's 23 words today and growing, and they get the back and forth. And if they end up doing the browsers they talked about doing and we use them, they will directly see, oh, where are you going? Are these sites actually engaging? Is this valuable? And that then would lead us to, okay, are our efforts being successful? And in the interest of time, I'll go through this a bit more lightly. Okay, we started with, did I rank for a basket of keywords I care about? Because that was the topical cluster, a basket of keywords. Now topical clusters shift to a group of questions. And we see most companies ad hoc checking like, did I show up at all? Was I mentioned? Am I cited? And then they mature to systematically measuring that, and then systematically measuring, how often did I show up relative to my competitors? You've got some great examples on this later on. And then was the sentiment positive here? And using that to help guide their efforts, our efforts in our investments. And when we surveyed those 400 marketers, what are you measuring? What are you doing today? They did this, but even with a couple of pre-steps to that, they said, hey, I'm measuring how much traffic am I getting from the LLMs? And most are seeing it go like this, but it's also not a huge part of the traffic yet. It's rapidly growing. 2, what's the conversion rate for that traffic? And as we were talking about earlier, literally everyone I talk to sees a higher conversion rate. And then they're going to see, okay, am I showing up? Final category, one that, again, GrowthX knows extremely well, and that's content. I'll cover this one briefly because Marcel and Jason are going to go more deeply into it. But here, we will grow from repeating a bunch of keywords to really thinking about our buyer journey, to thinking what questions are they asking. And I invite you to go LLM your sales call recordings. Go LLM your sales and CS emails to see what questions are people actually asking. And then go answer. Go answer them comprehensively. Go answer them with genuinely valuable original content, and then mature to extending that topic to a cluster of questions. Then go answer them comprehensively throughout the funnel at multiple levels. And finally, at the most scaled level, you want to do this programmatically, delivering exactly relevant content to each person. And that is something that GrowthX is magically good at doing. And so we're going to hear about that directly. The one last thing I'll share before we go there is that it turns out that the LLMs really value a lot of content because they also value it being fresh. 95% of ChatGPT's citations were updated in the last 10 months. At Webflow, Vivian and team 5x the speed of refreshing content, got 42% more traffic. That traffic converted better. And when you look at content that has some freshness indicator on it, like last updated stamp, 1.8x higher citation rate. And so how do you do that at scale without it being AI slop? For that, I'm going to turn it over to Marcel.
I love it. Well, I appreciate it. There's so many points here that I was tempted to kind of jump in as well, because like we're so much on the same page and seeing the same things, you know. And so the way we think about this, and I'll go through it quite quickly, but we've done 2 workshops previously that we'll share the recording in our AI-led-growth.com community. And so we have hours and hours of recordings there. So it won't be in the same depth, obviously, because I want to cover a few additional things. But if you're curious about how to generate the right context, right? And so let me talk about context. Think of this as the big picture. So many tools I've played around with and I've seen. And my biggest question is, how could you possibly do a good job with quality if you don't have the big picture? And so much of that big picture does not exist only on your website. Hopefully it does, and hopefully you've kept it up to date. Unfortunately, a lot of companies we end up working with, they are in the process of continuously changing their website or changing the latest and greatest. And so a lot of it, what does it live? It lives in sales calls, right? It lives on in the minds of some of your subject matter experts. It lives in docs that maybe never saw the light of day out on your website. And there's so much that context that you need around your personas. And so we believe in taking an audience first approach. And that's, if you asked me, funny enough, 10 years ago, how would I approach content strategy? How would I approach search? How would I approach winning the hearts and minds of my customers and the audiences I'm going after? It actually hasn't changed.
And I'll jump in saying that, like, at its core, the job to be done as marketers hasn't changed, right? We need to build brands, drive demand so that we can motivate people to buy stuff. And I feel like when folks are like, the whole world has changed, everything is different. I mean, in some sense, the tools at our disposal have some, but the core thing we're evaluated on hasn't. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is all about your ability to scale the context that you have to talk about your product, to talk about your brand in the right way. Then comes the build up to this, which is, what are all the topics that those audiences that you are very clear on? You need to be clear. So if our first thing we do when we kick off with customers is do a deep dive where we ask, who are you for? And if I ask your best 3 customers in each one of those segments, how would they describe your company? And what are you best at? And why are they your customer? And just kind of gaining that level of clarity is so critical. And that comes from not only the sales calls and things like that, but there's so much more for you to explore and expand. And I'll show in a second. Obviously, do competitive research too. And when I say competitive, is not just doing research now around keyword gaps and pages that your competitors have and topics that they cover that you don't cover, but it's also taking that and then reverse engineering questions that people might ask related to the topics. So let me just walk through a very simple example here. So let's say you are a web manager and you work for a B2B SaaS company, Series B. Okay, that's the persona I'm going after, right? And now you can say, hey, give me a job description of this person and actually like describe their day-to-day. Now let's go and do some deep research and actually look at all these sales calls and extract a lot of the pain points that they heard. Now give me a list of all the things that pissed them off and all their fears. Give me the reasons this person gets fired. Gives me the reasons this person gets promoted. Why do they get promoted? What did they do? What are their jobs to be done? But also what are their work products, the deliverables, the things that they actually do, right? And then you get to the point where it's going to say, hey, you know, one of the things they have to do is make sure their health of the website is up to date. Okay, how do they do that? Well, they need to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, cool. Now there's all these topics. For example, like how to update my sitemap and how to make sure my sitemap is working properly, how to update my schema across every single page. And now those are actual things they need to do that lead to a certain outcome. Now you can see there's this world of like topics that you can cover. And now how do you start to tackle those, right? And it's all about how you can scale quality. Just really quickly, kind of how we do it here at GrowthX. So a lot of the systems we build, agentic workflows and everything we do is to try to scale this in a personalized way to each company, right? And so this is an example of one of our customers. We work with Webflow too, this customer Augment Code. And so what we're doing is one of the factors I mentioned earlier, how well researched is this? And so a lot of what we're doing is actually going and having an agent that does all this research. And this agent is not just finding answers, it's actually taking all that context, right? Like all the context that we have before and is actually coming up with a plan and then generating this research plan. And this research plan, by the way, has evals baked in and has success criteria and even source requirements to make sure it's credible. Now, this doesn't mean you need to use this, but think about this as you're going through. If you're prompting Perplexity, ChatGPT, any deep researcher tool out there, make sure you have some of these things clearly spell out. For whatever your space is, you can come up with trusted sources. Come up with a list of actual domains. And when you're doing deep research in these tools, just say, here's the domains, these are the sources I trust, and this is why I trust these sources. This is automated, and we do this programmatically for companies, and we go through and review and have an editor in the loop that reviews these sources and creates almost like this white list of preferred sources, right? But you can do the same thing. You can also evaluate the quality of that research, right? Why is it sufficient and not sufficient? And you might be in the loop doing this, or you might build agents that do this. And then as you're going through it, have that critical eye or create agents and workflows that then generate additional questions. And that's how us humans do it, right? So what we're trying to do is kind of take a process that works, a process that we would do as humans if we were doing a very thorough job, right? And then we're scaling that out. And the same thing, adding internal links, external links, validating things, adding sources, because sometimes as you're using AI plus humans, some of those sources get dropped in the loop, right? So you want to keep a list of all the sources for your research, almost like a bibliography. And then at some point, you want to figure out which ones you want to reference back, you know, all the way down to doing fact checking. And I can't stress this enough, because the fact checking is not just about, you know, is this accurate or not? Is there a source that backs this statement? And then you're avoiding that hallucination. You're avoiding things that it's doing, you know. But then media is super important. Can you automate and can you streamline the creation of these assets, right? And whether that is you hiring an F ton of freelancers, whether it's you using tools, whatever it is, like, find ways that you put yourself in the shoes of your reader, and then look at those signals of engagement for these pieces of content, right?
This is amazing. I mean, to your point, this is like a whole project here now automated in the way you would really do it. I see here more than half an hour, 40 minutes of LLM time. I could imagine this was like, would have been
millions of
human
tokens.
weeks.
Millions of tokens, yeah.
For somebody
Exactly.
to do. And it's more than go play with an LLM this afternoon, right? There's real, it's the voice of experience embodied.
And I think, and Jason will talk through some of the results here, but I think one that's worth calling out here is if you search for, let's say, best AI coding tools for enterprise, we're not seeing one or two. Sometimes we're seeing 3, 4, 5. I've even seen 6 citations within one answer. And part of this is the nuance. Like, how can you possibly get this nuance right? And the way you get this nuance right is by getting the context right, and getting the knowledge right, and getting the retrieval right, and getting the human in the loop that has the context of all this, right? And so for us, like, there's all this context, right, around the product, the services, what it does, like explaining that Augment Code is better than Cursor in some use cases because of the context engine and how well they can handle complex code bases and whatnot, right? And then the last thing I'll mention, just to wrap up, and then we'll go into questions, is also like, as you're doing this, where are you storing all this content and all this knowledge, right? And are you storing it in a way that is semantically relevant? And ideally, you're doing all of this and you're creating this knowledge graph that over time you can actually retrieve it from, right? So this one is a deep research we did on a topic, and then you can see how everything correlates. And then over time, you're building this knowledge base of trusted sources that have been vetted by an expert in the loop, right? I know it's a lot, but hopefully this gives a little bit of like the high level of why this stuff is so important. That then leads to scaling quality, and then you can start watching these signals programmatically, right? And this is something we've been doing now for a while, but it's all about how can you systematically, we built this crawler that goes through, takes your entire sitemap and goes through every single day and pings every single API you can imagine, in addition to crawling all your content and storing every single day's versions of your site and your content and all your kind of signals of health on your site and content. So then, because the challenge is, you go into Search Console and you see a change, or you go into Google Analytics or whatever you're using, and you can't correlate that to the change that happened on your actual page, the content, the substance, or to the site and the HTML and the raw, output of your site. But you certainly can't correlate that to the 300 workflow steps plus human intervention step that happen. And that's part of what we're really passionate about, is how can you connect these three things together, you know? And so Jason will talk really quickly about some of these results that we've seen.
Cool. Yeah. So I just want to show 3 examples, exactly using the approach that Guy and Marcel have talked about, and just to show like the breadth of what happens. So Augment Code, incredible product, but in a lot of places lag behind Cursor, especially in places like ChatGPT and Perplexity. And in basically 3 months, we've published hundreds of articles at very high quality, and we've gone from almost no awareness to now, for some of the most competitive prompts they care about and keywords showing up. So, what's the best AI coding tool? What are alternatives to essentially, industry leaders like Cursor and GitHub Copilot? And just to go into the process a little bit, like one major unlock in the way we create content is like every type of content is its own little machine. And over time, you're not just building that machine, you're iterating it to be better. You can treat your, 100 articles almost as a product. And every, week, every month, you're making them better over time. And for the most part, they don't regress the same way that a human writer does. When you hire a new one, when you have to performance manage and scale up the team. The second example is Ramp, probably one of our first customers. And it really shows kind of what you can do when you do this over a long period of time. You can see, hundreds of thousands of visitors a month. We've created over 900 pages for things like vendor catalogs, little micro tools like per diem calculators, expense categories, and hundreds of editorial articles. And probably the most interesting thing for Ramp is like, we were doing this before AEO was even a thing. And we've seen now that it's become a thing, you have all these ways of measuring it, the same types of content we approached in this way, right? From first principles, building artifacts.
A few examples of that. Let's say you're traveling to Denver and you search per diem in Denver, right? Or let's say you are someone in finance sorting through transactions and you see office furniture and you figure out what category should I put office furniture under, right? Those are the types of content. Or, hey, we just did an ACH for one of our vendors to pay invoices. How long does an ACH transfer should take? And those are all the answers. Or let's say you're searching for pricing of OpenAI versus XAI for some of their models, and you want to see a comparison, and you want to see how some of the data that Ramp has. And so we built this vendor catalog with hundreds of vendors with proprietary data, as well as comparison between vendors, which is really, really unique.
And then last example, I mean, just on this topic of like the real North Star is content actually valuable in creating, solving problems for people. So with Webflow, our customer and the one I spend a lot of time on, we've really created content, not just for traffic, which you can see is growing, but really for like activating real people and enabling them to build. A little joke that we have in our meetings is like the tier list for content is you have SEO content, you have content you can see on Reddit, and then you have content for developers. And for Webflow, we're essentially doing this at, crazy scale. And again, over time, this content is just going to get better and better as we iterate the machine.
Amazing. Well, some closing thoughts?
And then if folks are willing, we'd love to stay long and talk questions. So is there a couple of things you take away in addition to the things Marcel and Jason just shared? One is this mental model of these 4 buckets where you go from keywords to answers, SEO to site structure, backlinks to widespread positive mentions, keyword ranking to share of voice and sentiment. And we then made up a rubric of 5 different levels where you go mature through each one of these. That leads you to this, which you can screenshot, use as a way to guide your team back in the office on Monday. It talks about maturing through each one of these levels, but practically right now, we invite you to do 2 things. One, on the link on the right, go there and put in your domain name. We'll run a super long prompt that will go look at your site, go look off your site, go look at that rubric we just shared on the previous slide, and share with you, here's what we see, here are the gaps we see, here are the suggestions we have for you to make it to the next level to improve your visibility in LLMs, primarily to take back brand narrative control and drive more traffic, and do that for all 4 categories, and then summarize. If you only do 2 things, do these. And the other thing we suggest you do is
check out AI-led-growth.com community, and we'll post the recording of this. We have a ton of resources, including an amazing interview podcast that we've done with Guy recently that goes even further in depth on a lot of these topics as well. We are happy to take some questions. I know we're just at time, but we are more than happy to go through some of the questions and have more open discussion here.
Jason, anything you saw that we should go dive into?
Yeah, I think one interesting one is we've talked about quality of lot, we've talked about kind of scale, volume, and also frequency of refreshing. Like, how do you think about the importance of these 3 things?
It all begins with understanding what's valuable to your prospects as they move through the funnel with you. That leads to devoting your energy in directions that will have an impact for them. Then on quality, I think using AI to help you think more deeply rather than to outsource your thinking is a great way to go. You'll produce more quickly. And you saw what Marcel and Jason were showing. The impact can be huge, but you have to be very thoughtful about it. And it's not AI generated, it's AI supported. Humans are very, very much in the loop. And then on recency and updating, I think the content machine is more voracious than it has ever been. And the bar for good, valuable content is as high as it's ever been. Like this is hard for us as marketers.
Yeah.
But there's an early mover advantage. I'm betting you've got a lot of points of view on this.
Maybe instead I'll focus on just one thing that I've seen make a huge impact. Customers and folks that get caught up on, this one little sentence over here could be slightly better. And then they kind of miss the whole boat of like, you're focusing on the stylistic of one little thing instead of going and actually becoming the best answer to all the questions that matter. So that's the biggest thing. Gone are the days that your CEO can spend 3 months on one single white paper in order to get it out and have 13 cooks in the kitchen trying to tweak it. because you will completely miss the boat on everything else. And so if anything, companies like Ramp and Brax and others that, they're trying to be super aggressive about like, how do we win this? I'm in a highly competitive space, and Webflow is the same way, moving super fast. And it's all about how can we move faster with quality?
Another interesting question is, do you guys see any tension between writing content for humans and writing content for the many, many agents that are now visiting our websites?
I fundamentally believe, I know some don't, that we should have ways to present the information potentially differently to agents and AI. And that's a lot of how what Webflow helps. But you are still trying to win the trust and the minds and the hearts of humans. And those humans happen to use AI tools. And those tools are trying to figure out what are the best answers to serve those humans. And so the deeper your understanding is of those humans, the better job you're going to do at both becoming the best answer to those humans and also becoming the answer that gets used by those tools to serve the best answers to those humans,
I am strongly aligned, Marcel. I think our websites and the content on them, yes, they do need to speak to two different audiences. For humans, people are going to want to hear your story told your way, engaging, compelling, forever. That is not going to change. And the machines want, as you said, a different presentation. You need genuinely valuable content because ultimately there's a human behind there, but they can more efficiently crawl and index your content if you make it succinct. It's succinct in terms of the images and the videos, giving them things in the formats they're used to that signal structure, that signal meaning. So you need both. We think websites need to do both. And just like folks will say, hey, SEO is dead. I couldn't disagree more. Oh, the website is dead. I totally disagree too. I think it will remain a destination for humans, and it will be a more and more effective data source for machines. By the way, it has been for a long time. That's why we put Google meta tags in there. That's why we did Facebook's Open Graph. That's why we did Schema for Google Knowledge Graph items in there as well. And so I fundamentally agree with you, Marcel, that good content is genuinely valuable to the prospect. And that's true whether you're talking to a machine or a human.
I love this question by Lawrence on how do you approach a company that has no persona research? Because there's so many things you can do. But the first thing is when you go hire someone, you come up with a job description, right, for that person. And best content is created and written for one single individual. So the more you can go as in-depth as possible, figuring out this individual and really the nuances, almost doing psychological analysis, pretend like you're their therapist, their work therapist, if you will, right? And then some of the things you can do is you can use a lot of deep researchers out there, but point them to different sources. So whether it's like Reddit or whether it's like, an extract of all your transcripts and put that in a knowledge base and then run a deep researcher against those. Review sites, G2 and several others are amazing sources. But what you need to do is you need to have the context a little bit of your company before you do that research. Because if you just say, hey, can you go do a bunch of research on this category or this kind of persona, it kind of lacks a little bit of that, right? And so you're decomposing, you're building that knowledge. But as my biggest piece of advice is, as you're doing that, refresh your artifacts. And then as you keep going further and further into the research, hey, you use the reviews, you have a company context artifact, go update your company context now with some of this additional context, and then keep using that updated artifacts to keep doing the research and so on and so forth, right? But most importantly, also don't try to overwhelm your context window, because if you just feed it like these massive docs because you're too lazy or don't want to do the work to kind of distill it down to the essence that matters the most, that's also not going to be super helpful either. Any other questions you saw come up?
I think there are some questions just around how you measure all this. There's a million tools out there that do this, a lot of them very expensive. I mean, without naming really any of them, like, what is our approach to kind of
many opinions on this?
Yeah, understanding kind of what the LLMs are saying. How do you measure it? How do you think about it?
We have an announcement coming up very soon, so I won't give that away. But I will just say that a lot of these tools should be free, and that data should be free. and we're going to make sure that happens. And what I mean by that is, if there's prompts out there, you should not be paying $2-3 grand a month to measure what the responses are, and if your brand is mentioned or cited. Like, that is the most basic thing you should do, and absolutely you should do that. And we do that. And it's all about then looking at what is actually on your site. Is your site and your health of your site, to Guy's point, and the framework and a strong foundation? Are you measuring the vitals on a page level and on a site level and outside your site, right? What's happening? Are people linking to you? And then the engagement that happens once they do land on your site. Also, how they're getting to your site, or how they're getting to understand your brand, which is the AI visibility piece as well. But then there's so many signals within your site that it's almost like people forgot about them. It's like, yes, you should get mentioned, and yes, you should publish content at scale in order to get mentioned and cited, but then you should care deeply about what's happening here on your website. And are people spending the time? Are they getting to the bottom of the page? Are they clicking through to the next best action, right? And then if they are, can you correlate that with the work that actually happened that resulted in that output being on your website? Like the different steps, the different interventions, the strategy that went behind it, right? And then can you create a loop around that, right? Where you're seeing, hey, this link just got broken. Did you find out that this link got broken automatically? And can you push that update to your CMS ASAP, right? Hey, this piece of content is now decaying in search and is getting cited less often because now it's past 3 months since it's been last updated. Those are the things that we're really passionate about building towards, but that are the things that we're measuring for customers that, today you might need to stitch it together a little bit to do it, but hopefully in the very near future, we can play an even bigger role in that.
I think it's a good place to end it.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, and thank you, Guy, for blessing us with your presence and knowledge.
Thanks for having me. It was great learning and a lot of fun to do together. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'd be delighted to continue the conversation on LinkedIn as well.